sit comfortably, as the Buddha did after the beginning of many sutras, the discourses. It would mention that the Buddha was residing in a certain place with his assembly of monastics, and they had gone out for morning pindapat, which means where they would, who knows Indian? Do you speak? You know what pindapat is? Who speaks Hindi or whatever? Right? Do we still, in Nepal, do you use that term, pindapat? Pindapat.
Bindabat.
Yeah.
How do you spell it?
I'll tell you later. So, rather than just spelling everything out. So it's when the monks would go with their alms bowl, and people would drop in some food, or they would give them a whole meal. And so the Buddha would come back, and the sutras would begin that the Buddha came back after Pindapat, ate his food, washed his feet, sat down cross-legged in the meditative posture, and placed his attention on the breathing in front. Almost so many sutras begin with this. So this is a kind of, maybe we could say emulation, imitation of the Buddha, what we're going to do right now. Sitting comfortably, remember that you had some breakfast maybe, or an energy bar on the way. Maybe you didn't wash your feet, but you sat down. Place your attention on the breathing in the sense of not controlling it, just observing it, to the exclusion of all other things that might occupy your mind. Let go of all other thoughts. Just be mindful of your breathing. Being mindful here means recognizing when you're breathing in and recognizing when the breath has just reached its culminating point and is about to change direction, and then recognizing when you're breathing out, again at that end point, sort of static, not moving one way or the other, recognizing those very carefully. Let every other distraction, thought, just go ignored. Let them dissipate. Let your body relax. Your head, your cheeks, your chin, your neck, shoulders, your arms, upper arms, lower arms, hands, chest, your belly, your back, your torso, your buttocks, your legs, your thighs, your calves, your ankles, your feet, all totally relaxed. Now, having calmed the mind just a bit in this way, let's go a little bit deeper by placing your attention on the consciousness, the mental consciousness itself. It's not your eyes, your eye consciousness. You can actually experiment, say, see something, open your eyes a little, see. It's not that. Not your ear consciousness that hears the buzzing of the fluorescent lamp or the other sounds. That's not what you would be paying attention to. Not the nose consciousness. Not your tongue consciousness with some aftertaste of breakfast or coffee. Not your tactile consciousness that may feel a little ache or pain here and there, or just this subtle sense of the presence of your body. None of those, but your mental consciousness within which you think and plan and remember, judge, constantly chattering. Placing your attention on that as a one part of the mind, watching the rest of the mind, like at a cafe, sitting at a table, watching the other tea and coffee drinkers. There might be a lot of thoughts coming, maybe not, but turn your attention away from the thoughts themselves that may be appearing now as you pay attention. Turn your mind away, your attention away from them to the mind, the subjective mind that is apprehending any of them. All of them, like a vast space within which those thoughts are arising, emerging from that empty space of the mind, the clear light nature of the mind. So focus on the space between the thoughts. Even when the thoughts are present, the very space where the thoughts are occurring. That itself, the mind that's perceiving them, has spaciousness that allows them to appear there. The mind is that which is clear in knowing. Very famous, simple definition of the mind, mental consciousness, I'd say in this case. Clear, like a vast space, unobstructing to thoughts, not material, not a result of matter. And knowing cognizes anything that appears to it, experiences it, unlike a piece of crystal which may be clear, transparent, but has no experience of what appears in it. let go of all those thoughts. Let go of your sense of the body. Almost seems impossible at first. Seems like it's definitely there, palpably there. But that appearance to your mental consciousness, the way that you think about it, is just an appearance to the mind within that clear light nature. If you take your attention away from it, that appearance begins to diminish because it's not being fed by attention. So kind of an iterative process here, letting go again and again, whatever occurs to your mind. Let's say if something appears to the mind, just ask yourself, what is the consciousness that's perceiving that? Let me experience that clear light nature of the mind. And let go of the objective thought by focusing on the subjective mind that's experiencing it. A little more subtler than the appearance of your body, let's say the sense of I, of self, of me, as being the observer or controller. That too appears to your mind like a thought, like an image within the clear light nature of your mind. See if you can turn your attention away from that sense of I to the consciousness that's perceiving it, thinking it, generating it. That consciousness itself is clear, spacious, unimpeding, has no form or color. You're approximating an apprehension of the mental consciousness with the consciousness itself, one part of the mind observing the rest of the mind. A vast space, like in India or in Asia after the monsoon, in the morning at dawn, just when the sun is rising. Just before it's risen, before there's any vibration of the color of the sun, clear sky that's been freed of all the dust due to the monsoon rain, as though you could see forever, that kind of sense of clear light nature. And then recognizing that even this is just an approximation of the mind, that this appearance that we have, that we've conjured up of the clear light nature of the mind is yet still an approximation, just a thought within the mind. Let go of that and see if you can perceive pure consciousness itself, within which that approximating version of the nature of the mind is embedded. Let go of the body, the self, the mind. recognize that within our mind we have the capacity, the space, to completely refurbish our sense of being. We can let go, like getting rid of the old furniture, or reformatting a hard drive on your computer. We can get rid of all of the old habits. Definitely, they are not part and parcel of the mind. They're of a different nature than the mind itself. And we can generate each and every good quality: patience, intelligence, love, compassion, kindness, forgiveness. This is our special feature, being born as a human being in a time when the Dharma teachings exist in the world, when we have an interest and time to occupy ourselves with them. Very, very rare and precious situation, because we can create the cause now, in this life, for the happiness of not just this life, but infinite number of future lives, by skillfully creating actions that, wholesome actions that are beneficial to myself and definitely beneficial for others. Starting to turn our attention to the plight of others. Whatever slight suffering we have now, we can always immediately think of others that are experiencing the same, empathize with them, and empathize with those who are experiencing much worse, taking our attention away from the self-pitying attitude. So with such a precious situation, one of the greatest things we can do is to listen to the Dharma, hear the teachings, think about them, contemplate them, and meditate on them. That is, to get familiar with them until we experience them. Out of a consideration for myself and all others, with a compassionate attitude to become better, so that I don't harm others, that I can actually benefit them. I think I'm going to listen to the discourse, the talk this morning, this weekend, on the Heart of Wisdom Sutra, the Heart Sutra, quintessential teaching of the Buddha on the highest wisdom. I'm going to do so with the intention not just of becoming, knowledgeable to use at the next Washington, D.C. cocktail party, or to impress people, but to really transform ourselves, to really heal, to see things as they are, and to eventually, with the intention of achieving the highest goal of enlightenment, so that I can most perfectly benefit all sentient beings, all living beings. I'm going to listen to the discourse this morning with that intention, with a new mind, clear mind. And then slowly bring your attention back to the present. Open your eyes if they're closed. Relax. Anyone have any experience they'd like to share? or that they wouldn't like to share, but under my pushing will share. Yes, Rajiv.
So,
Rajiv, right?
yeah. Venerable George, I saw a blue light that became bigger and bigger and bigger when you said, focus on your mental consciousness.
So that's good. People see many different things. You know, they have different kinds of experiences. I remember telling my teacher Lama Yeshe once that when I had good concentration meditation, that one half of my body would become palpably hot, and the other half would be cold and clammy. That would last for some minutes, and then it would switch. The other side, one side that had been cold would become hot, and this would be cold. And he was sitting on a bed, cross-legged on a bed. He laughed and laughed, and he fell over off the bed laughing. I got back and I said, so many, due to karma, so many different experiences that individual sentient beings have. So we shouldn't get caught up. His advice was that you shouldn't get caught up with experience, in any particular experience, you know, colors or shapes or seeing some form, or oftentimes it's colors. They're transitory, or sometimes if you have some experience that was kind of exciting in some way, you might, in the subsequent meditation, you might try to duplicate it. Where is that feeling? Or where is that color? I'm not doing something. All of these are transient, meaning impermanent, changeable, not lasting. But then again, blue's a nice color. You know? Blue's the color of the sky, and maybe some. If I had mentioned like the space or the sky, I don't think I used that word, but maybe I did. You might have brought that up. Anything else? Anyone else have? Yes, Lisa. Lisa, right?
So I just had a very brief half of a second experience. I've been meditating on the space between thoughts, and just because I had heard that a couple of weeks ago, it was very profound to me, so I've been meditating a lot on that. And then you were talking about that, and then you said to turn around and look at where the thoughts come from, not in the mind, but. And all of a sudden, I mean, I could, just for a split second, it felt like I was actually looking
At the mind.
And it was vast.
Yeah.
It was just
yeah.
Vast.
Yeah, we may have some, and some experiences like that. Sometimes very hard to duplicate it or to keep it, but through practice, through familiarity, that's the reason, that's kind of one of the meanings of meditation. Maitreya, the future Buddha, in one of his texts, gave a definition of meditation. You know, many people think meditation means this or that, sitting in a certain way. Meditation basically means familiarizing the mind with a wholesome state. So the particular wholesome state here, let's say, is the clear light nature of the mind. Familiarizing with it can be just getting a glimpse, but doing it again and again, and eventually being able to enlarge and elongate the period of time in which you're seeing that, holding that, and in so doing, recognizing that all of our thoughts are transient and impermanent, they're not the nature of the mind, and that with the proper technique, we can diminish them like in the laboratory of our mind. So that's a good experience. I think that's good. Someone else had raised their hand? Oh yes.
When I just abide in the experience of the mind, I can hold it for a minute or two, but then sometimes the appearance kind of crowds, the appearance of the mind, like the image of the mind kind of takes over. Like if one gives an image of a sky, then I start seeing a sky or clarity, but I'm not able to I lose the experience then, because the image
Right.
seems to
Right.
interfere for me.
Yeah, so the image, there you have to recognize this is just an image. Is the example that Lisa said is, I've used before, but I don't think I mentioned this morning, she might have heard somewhere else. It's like, if you're looking at something, if you turn around as though to see who's looking, I mean, you're looking, but it's as though you're turning your attention away from focusing on the image, let's say the sky, and turning your attention to what is the consciousness that to which this image of the sky is appearing, because that's still just an approximation of the nature of the mind. And it's useful if you've got say an image of a vast vacuity that's useful. You may not be seeing the mind itself, but that's useful because it's similar to what the mind actually will appear as. So in turning away from it, you're not going from something extremely different to this clear light nature, and then just without generating more images, dwell in that for some time, then recognize that that may have been sort of encrusted as an image of your mind. Let go of that again. Another way of thinking of it is like, I think I might have mentioned in other times I was here, like say a boulder, big rock. Where that rock is, and you know what space is. Let's say there's a rock and there's space around it. You know what in Buddhism the definition of space is? Have you heard? Someone may know.
Uninterrupted, unobstructed.
That which is unobstructive and so forth. So let's ask where the stone, the boulder is. If you ask, is there a space there? Some people might say, no, because the boulder is filling that space. But that's kind of like thinking, if you put a rubber ducky in the bathtub, submerge it, is there any water where the ducky is? And you say, no, because it's displaced the water. But space is not that way. There's no way that this boulder could be here unless there was space there, where the boulder is. I'm not saying between just there.
It's within it, sort of.
That space that was here, right here, it doesn't disappear when you put this here. That allows the boulder to be there. If there were not space, if there was something that was obstructive contact there, the space is the lack of obstructing contact. If there was not space there, you wouldn't be able to put it there. It wouldn't be able to remain there. So that's another way of looking, besides turning your mind away from the thought. Just there, letting go and seeing the spaciousness of the mind within which this image, thought is arising. Various strategies. We'll talk next weekend. I'll also give another seminar on Mahamudra. Have you heard of that? Have you heard of Mahamudra? Yeah. Okay. He knows those words because he's from Nepal. Mahamudra. Maha, like we say, great. Mudra means gesture or seal. So that is talking also about the same subject as today's discourse on the Heart Sutra, emptiness, but through the experiential means, rather than first understanding it intellectually and trying to experience it, first experiencing it, and then putting the final touches intellectually. So this kind of meditation we're doing as a prelude is like that Mahamudra. And there are many, many techniques to let go of that grasping of the mind to the images and just trying to perceive the mind itself. Okay, good. So one more preliminary. We're going to read together, chant together, the Heart Sutra, which you have a copy of, I hope. If you don't, raise your hand and someone will give you a copy. Okay? So this is a famous discourse that is often recited at the beginning of teachings, especially in Tibet, Mongolia, maybe Nepal, the Nepali Nuwari Buddhists also. Not so sure. Japan and Korea also revere this. I don't know if they do it at the beginning of teachings. I think they do also. The Dalai Lama mentioned that they sometimes recite it with a drum beat or something like that. So this, because of its, just because of the truth of the words being spoken here and blessed by the Buddha, it has ability to eliminate obstacles to the teaching. But especially if you think of the meaning as you've understood it over time, bringing back the experience of emptiness, that's one of the greatest defenses against any kind of obstacles. Okay? You see that they're not really obstacles, that they're just appearances and so forth. So we'll recite this together. Thus did I hear at one time, the Bhagavan was dwelling on massive Vulture's Mountain in Rajagriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feelings, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomena. There is no I element, and so on, up to and including mind, no I element, and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no distinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly, completely awakened to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment and reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is proclaimed. Tadyata Om Gate Gate Para Gate Para Samgate Bodhi Svaha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage. It is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated, even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan having thus spoken, the venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, asuras, Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. Okay. How are you feeling? Everyone okay? Oh. Oh.
I'll be back.
Okay. You just come for a short time. Okay. So, yesterday, I began to give a little background on the sutra. You know, the word sutra means discourse, essentially, or collection. It can mean also collection of discourses. This particular sutra is of the Mahayana, the great vehicle, as opposed to the teachings of the Theravada, which the Buddha said was his lesser vehicle, the Hinayana. These teachings that the Buddha gave were generally given to the Bodhisattvas, but some of his regular disciples that were following the path toward nirvana, the Hinayana disciples, that nowadays is called Theravada. It didn't have the name Theravada at that time. They were the disciples that were kind of called hearers, Shravakas. Have you heard that term? That heard the teachings, experienced them, and caused others to hear about their realizations, to inspire them. Also the Pratyeka Buddhas were not yet Buddhas, but they were aiming for nirvana. Those disciples, some of them also were present during the Mahayana teachings, kind of like, but they were not the main recipients, they were not the main intended disciples of those teachings. So this takes place at a particular time when the Buddha was dwelling on Vulture's Peak in India, near the town of Rajgriha, the king's city, royal city, with a big assembly of monks. If you've ever been to Vulture's Peak, and I know that Jeff has been, but has anyone else been to Vulture's Peak? Oh, you've also been, okay. Can you imagine a big community of people up at the top?
I have a magnificent picture of Vulture's Peak. It was the darkest, very covered sky, like it was going to rain, so it was all very dark. Oh. And in my picture, Vulture's Peak, that square, is lit just as bright and as gold as it could possibly be.
Oh, that's inspiring. Yeah. Please send it to me.
Yeah, it's wicked cool.
Yeah, I'll give you my email.
Sure.
So not a lot of space up at the top, and so you can imagine that some of these disciples may have had to have been in space, levitating, and certainly some of the Bodhisattvas may have been in other realms with divine ear, even some of the disciples listening. Did you know that's possible? You know.
Yes, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, you believe. You and I believe. I don't know if they believe. That's why I was asking them. So there are various special attainments called siddhis, common siddhis, not C-I-T-I-E-S, S-I-D-D-H-I. Okay, with S, say plural. So of the common siddhis, even I think Christ had some of the common siddhis. Being able to walk on water, to move through the sky, to go underground, to know others' consciousness, to, have clairvoyance.
To fly.
Yeah, I said fly in the sky, like some of the Mahasiddhis. There are images of them in the tankas, they're flying in the sky. There's also what's called divine eye and divine ear. Divine eye is the ability to see distant things, even beyond this earth, other realms, to see the Buddha's assemblies there. And divine ear, or clairaudience, I guess you'd call it, is the ability to hear at very great distances. So the community that was surrounding may have been in other realms. They didn't have to be, you don't try to have to figure, oh my gosh, it doesn't work, because how could they fit up on that little mountain? They could, some may have been levitating, if you can believe that, flying in the sky. Some may have been in other realms with divine ear and divine eye watching this. And besides the monks and nuns and maybe a lay community, there were also a great number of bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas are courageous beings who are aiming for bodhi, bodhisattva. Bodhi means enlightenment. I'm not sure if that's a popular boy's name now. I notice that the children's names go through cycles every couple of years with new names. I never knew anyone named Chad or Brad or Jared when I was in high school. They were all John and Joseph and Mary and Linda and things like that. But maybe Bodhi. This is B-O-D-H-I. So at that time, the Buddha was there. These people were there. He had set up his own cushion. He was meditating, and he had entered into a particular samadhi, particular concentration called profound perception. So it's in which he, within that concentration, unlike ordinary people, he could perceive all phenomena, not only on this earth, other universes, and their ultimate nature, their emptiness. So this is the very special quality that we're going to be talking about in the Heart Sutra. It's an exposition on the wisdom that perceives emptiness. Have you heard of emptiness before? What's the Indian word, Sanskrit word for emptiness? Do you know? Anyone? Shunyata. Empty means shunya. Shunya means empty. Emptiness is shunyata, so having the quality of being empty. It's not just like empty, like my mug is half empty. That's not shunya. Shunya is, or the quality of being empty, shunyata, is referring to something. Well, let's say this is empty, but it can be filled up, right? This is not the kind of empty that's referred to in shunya. There's another word for that kind of empty. So shunyata refers to the kind of sense of a balloon that's filled up, that seems like really substantial, or a bubble, like a water bubble floating. And the kids are fascinated and they want to touch it. But as soon as you try to touch, you recognize there's nothing there. There's nothing substantial there. There's an appearance of some substantiality, but actually shunya, empty of that. So it's sometimes commentators on this kind of wisdom, they say, oh, emptiness is not a good word. It should be fullness or something like that. But actually, emptiness is a very precise meaning here. So the Buddha was able to perceive each and every phenomena and simultaneously perceive its ultimate nature of being empty of the way that it was appearing to ordinary sentient beings. Ordinary beings cannot do that. Only a Buddha can perceive ordinary phenomenal things and their emptiness at the same time. We say all phenomena have two natures, right? All phenomena have two natures, a conventional nature and their ultimate nature. We probably, most of us here, maybe you're all Buddhists, I don't know. You could be all here, I could be the last sentient being existing. You're all here sort of having set up this elaborate ruse of a world and everything, and traffic as I'm going along, trying to save me. I can just see, Jeff, why didn't you tell me before? But if you're like me, you've never really experienced emptiness. All that you've ever experienced is the phenomenal, conventional world of appearances, which, from the point of view of someone who has recognized their true nature, their ultimate nature, are like illusions. They don't exist the way that they appear, like a dream. I asked a couple of you if you had dreams last night about emptiness or Vulture's Peak or anything, but I was just curious. Anyone have a strong dream last night that you remember? No? So sometimes when you have a dream, it seems very real at that time, very concrete. When you wake up from that, you recognize it was just a dream. And when we say that, just a dream, what do we mean? There was no reality the way that we thought during that dream, that like a dog was chasing us, or we had gone outside, gone to work, were completely naked, and then now the office was all looking at us because we were embarrassed, so we wake up. This didn't happen, right? Totally empty. So like that, the example of a dream, like an illusion, a reflection in a pool of water of the moon that a deer might see and think, wow, what's that? There's nothing there. You know, it appears, but it's empty of appearing that way. So these two natures, conventional nature, ultimate nature, are called the conventional truth and ultimate truth. Conventional truths are not really truths, the things that we see. From Buddhist perspective. Did you know that? Why is that? Why are conventional truths not truths, technically?
I don't know that.
Oh, you don't know that? Okay. From a Buddhist perspective, something which is really true, the way that it appears has to be the way that it exists. Like if your neighbor who is secretly moving the fence between your property and says every day, a couple inches, so his property is getting bigger, yours is getting smaller. But when you come out to, you're looking, it's smaller on my side. You're looking and he's smiling, he's putting on this face, false appearance of friendliness, of naivete, and I haven't done any sort of thing, sort of innocent face. That mode of appearance of naivety and innocence doesn't accord with the actual mode of being, trickster, scoundrel, real estate stealer. So we know in our own lives that even though it may seem more comfortable sometime to accept things that are false, in the end, if you accept things that are false, you're always going to end up with problems. We know that from our own experience. We should deal with the truth. So conventional truths are not actually truths. They're said to be truths for a mind that's obscured to ultimate reality, like our minds. Jeffrey Hopkins, a great translator of Buddhism that for many years was the head of the Buddhist department at University of Virginia, he coined a phrase, trying to translate this into English, he called them conventional truths. He says, truths for a jerk. You know, like, and I don't want to become political, but you can almost see some kind of things when people are talking about truths today, you know, like only a jerk would believe that, you know. So truths for a jerk, or truths for an ignorant mind, those are conventional truths. They're not really truths. They're only true within the perspective of a mind that's limited to understanding. So everything we see is like false news. What is that? No, fake news. You know? Everything we see, it's not really true the way that it appears. There is a continuity of those appearances due to our karma, our actions, our collective actions, our individual actions, the law of cause and effect. But there's a certain sense of reality in all of these conventionalities that we see now, that you're looking at me, that a certain sense of findability, reliability, reality that is not really there. It's only true for that ignorant kind of mind. So those are conventional truths. So in this concentration the Buddha was equipoised on, he was able to perceive all of these conventional truths the way that sentient beings perceive them. To a Buddha's mind, they don't appear that way. He only knows how they appear to sentient beings by knowing sentient beings' minds. They don't appear naturally, you know, to the Buddha that way. And he's also able to perceive the way that they appear to his mind as empty of inherent existence. And that means emptiness. So he's in that's the setting. He's up there. And at that time, the following takes place. One of the disciples, one of the Bodhisattva disciples, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara, was there. And he was meditating also on emptiness, on the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom. So what's the difference between the perfection of wisdom, best wisdom, and emptiness? What's their relationship? Same thing? Was it, I forgot your name, with the long hair.
Eric?
Eric.
Paramita is it's like a area of knowledge. It's approaching direct wisdom, whereas the emptiness would be just the nature of things as it is.
Okay, did you hear that? Good try. So the perfection of wisdom, there are many levels of the perfection of wisdom. Ultimate perfection of wisdom is the wisdom that the Buddha has. Okay? You can say that you are practicing the perfection of wisdom on the Bodhisattva path up until Buddhahood, when you actually attain the perfection of wisdom. Otherwise it's called the practice of the perfection of wisdom. But wisdom is a mind, a subjective mind that's observing and knowing things correctly. Emptiness, in this case, is its object, that which it's knowing. So, although the perfection of wisdom has as its ultimate nature emptiness, it is empty itself, but it is a subjective mind, and its object is emptiness. So subject and object. Make sense? So they're not the same. Is emptiness something very precious, very difficult to encounter? What do you think? Emptiness is something very precious. We should bow down to emptiness. You'll never see in scriptures any homage paid to emptiness. Like my teacher Lama Yeshe used to say, emptiness. Emptiness is everywhere. Even caca has emptiness, you know. What is precious is the wisdom that realizes it. It's not to demean, the emptiness is the ultimate nature of phenomena, but it's not as though it's hard to find, that it's scarce. It's everywhere. Yes, Lisa?
Isn't it a non-object instead of an object?
A non-object would be technically something that doesn't exist. It is an object, but maybe what you're thinking is that it's a negative phenomena, not a positive phenomena, emptiness. That is to say, there are many ways you could, like when you think of, I like to use the example of pizza, because I like pizza, but like I said, big pizza, you know that what was the local one, Pizza Hut, you could either get it cut like diagonally, so it's the triangular pieces or whatever, or you could get it cut into squares. Did you know that? You probably didn't know that, Jeff. You can actually ask. But you can divide all phenomena itself in many different ways, like that. You can divide them into negative phenomena and positive phenomena, into impermanent phenomena and permanent phenomena. It's like cutting the pie of all phenomena and of all things in different ways. So positive phenomena are things that manifest themselves to the senses directly, like your dog, the trees, the fences, the houses, are afflictions, are delusions, things that appear. Those are all positive phenomena. Most of the things we experience are positive phenomena. There are other things that are known through the avenue of negation. Like, say, do you see an elephant in this room right now? Good. Phew. Okay, I wasn't sure. Jeff, you're checking? Oh, you're seeing the pictures. No, I mean big, hairy, peanut-eating elephant. Is it Hansa? Huska. Huska, do you see elephant? You perceive an elephant in this room? No.
I could imagine.
We could imagine, but so the non-existence of the elephant in this room at this time is a phenomenon. It's not something that presents itself to the eye directly. It has to be known through the avenue of negation. I don't, look around, you don't see the elephant, there's no droppings, there's no straw, no manure, no elephant sounds, no color. Emptiness, let's say impermanence. Is that a positive phenomena or a negative phenomena? Positive phenomena? Does it appear to your senses directly? Say subtle impermanence? Let's qualify subtle impermanence? The momentary change of things moment by moment? Actually, it does appear to our senses, but our senses are not honed to perceive that. It is a positive phenomenon, but it's a subtle phenomenon. There's another way of cutting phenomena: subtle, gross, most subtle, and so forth. So you're right that it's a positive phenomenon, but emptiness, on the other hand, the fact that phenomena don't exist the way that they appear is perhaps what Lisa was thinking of, is a negative phenomenon rather than being a non-object. It's a non-affirming negation, technically. It's a negation, a negative phenomenon. It means a negation. What is it negating? What it's negating is the apparent existence of this let's say this mug, this thermos, as though it really existed from its own side, not just merely labeled, not just called mug, and being able to change and so forth, but as though it really was mug from its own side. The negation of that without implying anything else in its place. Not saying, it's not a mug, but it's this. Not like that. That would be an affirming negation, where you negate something and affirm something else in its place. Yeah, that's the one you've got to send me. I think Lisa just found the, is that the Vulture's Peak photo? Okay, I'm going to send you. So maybe that's what Lisa was thinking of. So, here's the situation. Buddha is meditating on emptiness and both ultimate truth and conventional truth at the same time. This bodhisattva, the Arya Avalokiteshvara, the Arya means someone who has realized emptiness directly. He's contemplating how the bodhisattvas practice the perfection of wisdom. And he beheld, what he's knowing at that time, that those 5 aggregates are also empty of inherent nature, inherent existence. What does that mean? And why the word also? Do you know what the 5 aggregates are? Eric, do you know the 5 aggregates?
Those things that we might take for a self, so body, form, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, consciousness, all the things we could say, oh, that's me, because I have this body, I have this life.
Okay, yeah. I forgot the name of the lady at the very back. No, Linda. Yeah. Linda, you've heard of the 5 aggregates? No, but I just wonder if any...
Am I familiar? Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Anyone who hasn't heard, you haven't heard of what the 5... You have heard? Okay. So, just as a recap, the Buddha mentioned these. I'm not sure in Hinduism if there was some emphasis on 5 aggregates, but what it means, another way of saying aggregates is heaps. Like if you have your car, I have a Subaru, which is very popular in North Carolina where I am in the mountainous area. So if you take a Subaru and you take all of the iron steel of the car, you take it apart, put all the iron in one place, put all the glass, the windshield, windshields and so forth in another pile, all of the grease and oil, the petroleum, everything in another pile. Did I mention rubber? Like the tires, some gaskets, rubber coverings, another pile. What else might it have?
Plastic.
Plastic, okay, good. Made plastic and wood or something. You'd have a bunch of heaps, piles, so you call it aggregates. So in the same way, you with the kind of surgical mind, you can kind of imagine the body, the person being divided into these various things. There's a heap of parts that are all physical, called the form aggregate. And then there are the within the mind, there's a bunch of things. There's the feelings, discriminations that are set aside for a particular reason, and then all of the other mental factors, and then then consciousness, pure primary consciousness. Those are 5 piles, you might say. And in so doing, you can kind of disassemble the person. Don't think of Hannibal Lecter or anything like that, because he can't do the mental part so much. You can imagine, where is the person? Is the person the body aggregate or the feelings? Sometimes we think the feelings are important, the discriminations, mental factors, which include wisdom and ignorance and it, or the primary consciousness. Primary consciousness means the consciousness which is just the bare nature of awareness, that which is clear and knowing, not without making any discriminations about the phenomena, just the ability to have that. So it's the basis for investigating the self. Where is the self? generally, at the time of the Buddha, what he taught to his disciples, to the hearers and solitary realizers, the Pratyeka Buddhas, he mainly taught a simplified version of wisdom compared to the Bodhisattva's wisdom. He taught about the emptiness or the selflessness, the lack of a self. So this is very, very important. That we have within our own mind now a conception of our own self, me. Many kind of psychological methods that people sit across from one another and say, who are you? And you might say, I'm a dentist, I'm a housewife, I'm a retired government worker, G5. So we have some kind of idea who we are. Let go of that. And further down, what are you? I'm a human being. I'm a man, or I'm a human. People sometimes start crying, not knowing. But we get very, very deep level. We find that there's a sense of I, of self, that seems to be there as the experiencer, let's say, the controller of the aggregates, just existing from its own side. That it itself is the primary cause of all our problems. Why? Because in accepting that, assenting to its existence, because it's appearing. Does everything that appears exist? The way that it appears? Let's say, like, the famous example I give is when I was in India, there was a lady who told me she was she was traveling through India, it was all sweaty and in sort of old clothes for traveling on the train. She first went to an inexpensive hotel to get a shower and change into her nice clothes to go to the good hotel. It was that radical. So she's going to the big hotel. And there's these big, these big glass doors. So the doors are there, she's walking in, and she had on her, maybe it was a red dress or something, and she's, out of the corner of her eyes, she saw another lady in the same dress. I mean, that's bad enough here, but in India, going into the hotel, it was like, wow, what is that? She looked, and she saw it was her own reflection in one of these big glass doors. Has that ever happened to you? You see, so, some reflective thing that seems so clear. Like a reflection that seems real. There are things that appear but are devoid. There's no real lady over there, right? That wearing a red dress. But actually appeared that way, but if you realize it, wow, that's a good example. That some things appear, like the self appears, but doesn't necessarily have to exist that way. So this is Jeffrey.
Why is emptiness not an affirming negation?
Because in negating inherent existence,
right,
that the things are existing there from their own side without just being names.
It therefore affirms.
It doesn't affirm anything. All you experience is that mere vacuity, the mere lack of that. Like who's been stealing my silverware? It's not the housekeeper, it's not my neighbor, it wasn't George, he wasn't here long enough, I weighed his bag before he left. Finally, you get to realize that there was no one stealing your silverware.
You're saying that the analysis that there is no inherent existence does not lead to the conclusion that emptiness is the nature of existence. You're saying that?
There's different kind of analyses you can do. Ultimate analysis, which verifies emptiness, that phenomena are empty of true existence, it experiences a mere vacuity. During that time, there's no appearance of phenomena, no appearance of anything, but a continuity of understanding that things are devoid of existing the way that they appeared. Like, say, the I, the self. If you were to analyze and recognize its emptiness, selflessness, or called selflessness, eh? Selflessness is a person. at that point, what you had been thinking about previously, recognizing this I, how it appears, how it would be contradictory to exist that way, once you've understood that, concluded, oh man, it doesn't exist at all, and you settle in that, all that appears to you is a mere negation, the lack of what you had previously been focusing on. Nothing else is affirmed in its place, like, oh, but it's empty. You're not even calling this emptiness. Even to call it emptiness is not, if you're thinking, this is empty, this is how it is, you don't have a perception of emptiness at that point. Okay? It's not an affirming negation would be something like, the example Buddha gave, the fat Devadatta is the name of one of the Buddha's cousins, one of his rivals. The fat Devadatta who does not eat during the day. Like someone who's, there's some fat guy, but he never eats during the day. How could he live? He has to eat at night, right? So that's an affirming negation. It affirms that Devadatta eats at night, even though it doesn't say that. There's some implication like that. So, speaking of eating, it's 5 minutes to 12. Venerable, was it an hour and a half?
We can do 12:30 to 2 or 12 to 1:30.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking it's 12. Is it 12:30? Is it general? Okay, so it's good, better, yeah. So we get a little bit more time to finish up this thought. How are you feeling? Do you need to take a quick pee-pee break? Okay, Lisa?
So this is kind of a visual, but is it sort of like if you see something and you have to explode it into its, it's not what it appears to be because everything is made up of all of the things it's made up of. So if you explode it up into all the things that it's made up of and all the things that they're made up of, eventually you come up with nothing.
That's not the meaning of emptiness, although in some interpretations people think they kind of get a feeling of emptiness because they say, oh yeah, there's all this space between the atoms, even the atoms and molecules, if you look, they're made up, even the fundamental particles are just waves and space, and that's not what's meant here. The best way to get a hold of emptiness, I think, is because the Buddha said that when you first have an apprehension of emptiness, rather than understanding the emptiness of phenomena, how this doesn't exist the way that it appears, is in terms of one's own ego identity. It seems to be something that is real, almost, as though it should be there, findable, but you can't, as you search, you can't find it. You can't find it in the body, you can't find it in the mind. You can't even find it separate from the body and mind. It seems to be related to the body and the mind, but it is not findable within them. But through further analysis, like saying, if it existed this way, existing by itself without relationship to anything else, something that was what the Buddha called inherently existent, truly existent, existing not just as a concept, but actual findable. Like say, for instance, a forest. Is a forest really existing? This is a little bit similar to what you're saying. If you go to a group of trees, that's what we impute as a forest, right? We call that a forest. But can you find the forest anywhere in the individual trees, or in between the trees, or separate from the trees? There's a certain understanding that forest is something that's just designated by the mind on a particular set of factors and trees, bushes, whatever, you know. You follow?
Mm-hmm.
There might be a sense, a very strong sense of forest in your mind, that it really exists in and of itself as a findable, inherent, existing from its own side, not just designated to this group of trees, but there is a forest there. If you realize the non-existence, the utter non-existence of forest as existing by itself. Let's say, if you took away the trees, is there such a thing as forest? No, there's no way you can have a forest without trees. You might call, there might be places in the States or other countries, and you go to some place and say, you know, Vandenberg Forest. And you go there and there's just big plains. You know, well, there's no trees here. Say, oh, it used to be trees. And so they still keep the name for historical reasons. Can you imagine that? I imagine there might be some places like that. They call forest, but if you go, there's no trees. It's just big plain, cows mooing and everything. So the self, the way that it appears as inherently existent comes about like this, according to Sutra and Tantra, that we experience something, parts, let's say our aggregates, and because of a continuity of ignorance from numberless lives in the past, we give a name, but immediately upon giving the name self, you know, this is me, I, there appears to the mind, just giving the name like forest, but immediately there seems to be simultaneous with it, and a forest, a sense of forest that exists from its own side, a self that exists from its own side, that's really there, that's not just a name. When you have the first experience of selflessness of persons, it's said, you recognize that this demon, this sense of self, that's not the main thing, the appearance of the self. The main thing is the ignorance that grasps to it. The fundamental ignorance. You know what I mean by grasp to something? That, like holding something is really true. Assenting to it, like agreeing with it. Do you agree that that is Richard Gere? You know, yeah, you know, that's him. Or assenting to something, like in parliamentary debate or something like that. It means you agree, and sort of like, yeah, I'm going along with that. So this basic ignorance that sees the appearance of the self as seemingly floating there by itself, independent, not just a name, like Forest or George that's labeled onto my aggregates. But once that appears, due to numberless, infinite, past lives ignorance, immediately encrusted with an appearance of inherent existence. Just the name George, the Buddhists can understand, is just a name. Like the Buddha said in the Prajnaparamita Sutras, Bodhisattva is just a name. Get over it. Excuse me for another political thing. I don't know if you're all following the news, okay? Bodhisattva is just a name. There's nothing, you know, inherently there. Whew, wow, that is, you know, sometimes without explanation, it's like, what does that mean? We are words, that I am the word George? Is how do you know? It doesn't mean that exactly. It means that on the level of how we can be said to correctly, conventionally exist, we are merely designated to this changeable collection of parts, but there's no I, no owner, no experiencer separate than the mind that's experiencing. that sense of I, once you, through logic, you recognize it, that gives you an incredible sense of how other things can be empty of inherent existence. That this thermos is just a name labeled onto these parts. And because of continual ignorance over numberless lives, having given a name to these parts, the thought of thermos, I'm not talking about the thought of the parts, because they have their own origin and how they appear to the mind, but the sense of my thermos, like you might think, oh man, did George take my thermos? Is he going to break it? He's so clumsy, he might have dropped it. You said something like, thermos, this is my thermos, don't worry. She was thinking maybe I was talking about her, that I had borrowed her thermos and I might drop it or something. This is my thermos. There's another question what mine is. So there's a sense of, let's say, your cell phone. Is there anyone who doesn't have a cell phone? Felicity, is that Felicity? Do you have a cell phone? Yeah, okay. So you're not. It's not in your hand right now, I hope, right? Well, maybe it is. Okay. Do you have a sense of your cell phone? You don't even have to think of its parts. It's just like, where's my cell phone? It's though it has a real existence. So emptiness, to actually understand emptiness well, to have a perception of it, takes a lot of time, a lot of merit, collection of virtuous karma to sustain that realization. The practice of devotion to the teacher, the guru, and so forth. So the situation is that this particular bodhisattva, one of the great bodhisattvas, Avalokiteshvara, the compassionate one, he was thinking about, looking upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, this wisdom that perceives emptiness, not the emptiness itself, and he beheld these 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. So what that means is that when, in the Theravada tradition, in the Hinayana in general, when talking about emptiness, if you look through the Hinayana scriptures, the Pali scriptures, you will not find the word emptiness more than 3 or 4 times in all of the sutras. Did you know that? It's not a word they use. It's not shunya or shunyata. There is some places, but it's talking like the gompa, the temple is empty of monks. It's not talking about emptiness, right? Not this meaning of emptiness. Usually the word that's used is anattama. What does that mean? Do you know? Anattama? Atma means what? Soul or self. You could use it, gloss it as soul, but generally it can mean self. Who you think of yourself as, that's your Atma. The Atma does exist conventionally. There is a Gabe, but it's the Gabe very different than what we are imagining it to be. It's just the Gabe that's merely labeled onto your body and mind. When you compare that with how Gabe seems to be appearing to your mind, radically different. What do you mean, I'm just a mind? I'm just a name. There's a real me, I've done these things. I've won these awards. I have these good qualities. I have these faults. I have this. Sense of I, very radically different than just being labeled. So in the Theravada tradition, the followers, the Shravakas, and let's say the Hinayana, the followers of the Shravaka and Pratyeka Buddha paths, their main object, mostly, until they get to very high levels, is the selflessness of the person. An atma. An is a negating particle in Sanskrit. Sometimes it's just the letter A. But because atma begins with A, to negate it, there's another correlated an. So Otherwise it would be atma, but anatma. In fact, there's one perfection of wisdom sutra called the perfection of wisdom in one syllable. That syllable is Negate every, there is no eye, there is no nose, there is no, okay. So, for them, there is the assumption when they're beginning this that the self doesn't exist the way it appears in a certain way. Very liberating, but it doesn't act to eliminate the delusions from their root, all of these afflictions in our mind. But it's very, very liberating, and it can cause the problematic minds, our anger, attachment, and so forth, to diminish immensely. But from their point of view, the rest of what the I is, let's say, labeled on, does exist. The body exists, really, inherently. The feelings, discriminations, compositional factors, which include all the other delusions, and wisdom, bad things and good things that are in the mind, that are secondary mental factors, and the primary consciousness. All of these things, okay, these exist. It's just like the trees exist, but the forest is just labeled. Like that. The body exists, the mind, all of these things exist, but the self, that's just labeled. And this thing that seems to be there existing without being labeled, that's empty. They're very liberating. So here, Avalokiteshvara is saying how the bodhisattvas meditate on the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom. This is the practice of the bodhisattvas, and beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent existence. So that would what's the thing that people do with your kids, like, some symbol, how do you do that? Felicity, you must know. Yeah, okay, yeah. Like the Hinayana practitioners, if they heard, not only is the self empty, but even the things that it's labeled on, the 5 aggregates, are also empty of inherent nature, inherent existence. Make sense? This lady behind, what is your name again? Yeah, no, yeah.
Anna.
Anna. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, but I get a little bit confused. You said all the body, mind, the 5 aggregate exist, but the self, the I, is labeled, is empty.
Right, that's from the Theravada point of view. Let's say from the basic teachings that the hearers and solitary realizers receive from the Buddha. He was treating them in a way that the true meaning of emptiness would be revealed a little bit later. Mainly they meditate on the selflessness of the person. They're not centering on the selflessness or emptiness of the body, the parts, the body, the feelings, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness. They're just meditating on the emptiness of the self in some fundamental way. Not the most subtle way, but still a good way. When Avalokiteshvara is going to be mentioning here about how the bodhisattvas practice perfection of wisdom, they're not limited to just the selflessness of the person. Everything else, including, let's say, starting with the aggregates of the person. From the Theravada point of view, it's like the example of the trees and the forest. You can recognize that forest is just a label, right? It doesn't exist without the parts. It's just labeled onto the parts. In the same way they can see the self is dependent on the parts, but doesn't exist from its own side. But from this point of view of an ordinary person, we say, oh yeah, but the trees are there. There are trees there. So it's kind of analogous here to this Theravada practitioners, the Hinayana practitioners. They're, at this point in their development, they're accepting that these things, the basis of labeling the person, like the trees, the aggregates, they do exist inherently, really. They exist the way that they appear as findable. But the thing that's labeled on them, the self, doesn't exist. Now Avalokiteshvara is thinking about how the Bodhisattvas practiced the profound perfection of wisdom, and he understood, beheld that those five aggregates also, he beheld them also as empty of inherent nature. So this is like what I was saying. Did I get it right? Blew their minds. Okay, so then, this first part is related by whoever was remembering this sutra, sort of with the permission of the Buddha. So it's considered to be the Buddha's word, even though it's just telling about the setting and so forth. Now another kind of explanation, even though this is called a sutra, the Buddha's word, the Buddha's not saying anything till the very end, it just says a sentence or two at the end, but it's all considered to be Buddha Vakana, the speech of the Buddha. Why? Because this next part, then through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya of Avalokiteshvara. Do you know who Shariputra was? Jeff, do you know who Shariputra was?
Disciple.
Some guy. Shariputra was one of the two main disciples of the Buddha. Often with statues, there'll be two Buddhas seated, there'll be two standing bodhisattvas, two disciples on either side. Do you know who they are?
Ananda.
Not Ananda. Who's Moggallana. So sometimes Maha Moggallana. And who's the other? Shariputra. So they were true friends. They didn't meet the Buddha from the very beginning. They weren't a number of the first 5 disciples, but they were well before when Ananda came. Ananda was one of the cousins of the Buddha who came once his fame was well spread, and they all wanted to become monks and sort of share in that. Oh yeah, he's my cousin, Buddha. We all had something like that. Oh yeah, I know so-and-so. He's my cousin. So Shariputra and Moggallana had some other names in the Pali scriptures also. They were buddies as kids, and as they grew up, they had this karmic connection from many previous lives. They wanted to find moksha, the way to get out, and they went to all of the great Vedic scholars and practitioners, just as the Buddha did in his search for enlightenment, with the best people, never found anything satisfying. Once Shariputra was walking, so I'm not sure how old he was. He probably was, my guess, in his mid-20s, late 20s. He's walking down a path, and he sees this incredibly peaceful monk with an aura of control and bliss, and and he asked him, who are you? Are you a wise man? And he said, no, I'm just a disciple of the Muni. Now his name is escaping me at the moment. He was one of the first 5 disciples of the Buddha. This man. Anyway, I'll think of it later. And he said, well, can you tell me the essence of, tell me the teachings? How did you find this incredible state? And he said, I'm not capable of doing that. You should see my teacher, Shakyamuni. And he said, well, can you give me something? Kind of like us, give me something. And he said, okay. He said, Ye dharma hetu prabhava hetu teshan tatagato haivata teshan sayo niroda evam mahaburi shramanaya svaha. Does that sound familiar to you? Have you ever read it? Eric, what is it?
I don't know the meaning, but I know the mantra.
Yeah, it's called the mantra of dependent origination. If you put Om at the beginning and Soha, Svaha at the end. But it was actually the origin of that famous mantra. When we bless our speech, so many rituals use that so-called mantra of dependent origination. Because what he's saying is, Om ye, or say, Ye dharma hetu. Of those things, of those phenomena that arise from causes, the Buddha explained their cessation. Om ye dharma hetu prabhava hetu teshana. He explained their causes. and he also explained their cessation. So it's sort of like talking dependent origination, so forth, and like the arising of the delusions and how they cease. Became very, very famous. Blessed maybe by the Buddha's inspiration, he said that. So Shariputra had asked that, and he was inspired. He said, wow. He said, went back to see his friend Moggallana, and he said, let's go to see this Muni, this Siddhartha, who's revered by the kings, who's realized he's a Buddha, an enlightened one. And so over time, Shariputra and Moggallana became the two main disciples of the Buddha. Shariputra was renowned as being, of the Buddha's disciples, the one who was foremost in wisdom. Do you know what I mean by foremost? The best of those that had the highest. He was like the best of those with wisdom. Moggallana was best in what? Do you know? Riddhi, which means psychic powers, like clairvoyance, knowing distant objects. He was like the almost. Didn't take the aspect of being tantric, but almost like Padmasambhava or something. Like he wanted some magic powers. You went to Moggallana. He could know past lives better than other people, and future lives, and distant places, and so forth. But even his powers were dwarfed by the Buddha's. So here, interesting, Avalokiteshvara is not known to be the wisdom bodhisattva, but he's here out of compassion, and he's talking about wisdom. He's known to be, wise, a bodhisattva. So Shariputra, who is the best in the Hinayana wisdom department, is foremost of the Buddhist disciples in wisdom, thinks he knows all the Buddhist teachings of wisdom, but from the Hinayana point of view, right? Just talking about the selfless as a person, and he's questioning Avalokiteshvara, saying, hey man, how did the Bodhisattvas practice their perfection of wisdom? I know how we hearers and solitary realizers practice wisdom, but was there something different, same, or what's going on? That's kind of the essence of this. This is inspired by the Buddha's presence. That's why this is called inspired speech. The Buddha didn't do anything, didn't leave his concentration, but just, because of dependent origination, Shariputra is inspired to ask that to Avalokiteshvara at that time. Then through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara. How should any son of the lineage, maybe just the masculine, in the different translations of the sutra, some have, he says son or daughter of the lineage, but many of them say just son. It's sort of like from the Theravada tradition, it's like women, So it's just talking about how should any son of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom, how should they train? How should any son of the lineage train, to get higher, who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He asks Avalokiteshvara. Got it? So Avalokiteshvara said, he said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Sharidvati Putta. Here the name seems to be different. Do you think it's a misprint? Venerable Dundrup, did he make a misprint? No, he didn't make a misprint. So in the sutra, his Shariputra is sort of the short name. Sharidvati Putra is more precise. Shariputra means son of Shari. Shari is his mother, right? Follow? Like what? Johnson, son of John, right? Gonzalez, what does Gonzalez mean? Anyone Spanish here? You're not Spanish, right?
Yes, but I don't know what it means.
Gonzalez, I think it means son of Gonzo or something like that. And I laughed when I was in Colombia teaching one time. I said, that would be funny, because like we have in our language is Johnson and things like that. And someone said Gonzalez, and I said Gonzalo Gonzalez. You know, this could be also be any first name Gonzalo. So Sharidvati Putra is just a more precise way of saying, more honorific way of saying Shariputra. So it's not a misprint, it's just, he's sometimes also called Sharidvati Putra. So Avalokiteshvara is answering this question because Shariputra, the foremost in wisdom of the Hinayana disciples, says, how do you guys train in wisdom? Shariputra is saying, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage, come on, this is enlightened bodhisattva, who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom, should look upon it like this: correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Again, Shariputra, poof, you know, whoa. Not only is the self empty, and usually in the Hinayana tradition, their meaning of emptiness is a little grosser than this empty of inherent existence. But say for the sake of argument that they're talking about the emptiness, the lack of inherent existence of the self. Now he says, even that which you're labeling it on, the body and mind complex, the five aggregates, they themselves are also empty of inherent existence. In the same way that you have that sense of incredible vacuity, emptiness, recognizing the self doesn't exist at all the way that it appears, if you were to meditate on the body and these other parts, they also, you would understand them also as empty. Implication here is that all phenomena are empty because, well, all impermanent phenomena. When we talk about the five aggregates, all impermanent phenomena can be included in five heaps, five aggregates. All material things of the universe, as here now, the heap is much bigger than the human, right? All the material, all of the feelings of sentient beings, all of the discriminations, all the compositional factors, all the primary consciousness. All impermanent phenomena can be found somewhere in there. And you might say, well, what about peanut butter? Where is that? It's not in any of those. Well, maybe peanut butter is form aggregate, okay? But what about some other things? All the other things that are impermanent, like time and other things, are in the compositional factors aggregate. So this is quite a big, mind-blowing experience for Shariputra. And he says that they should, so how should they train? They should look at it like, they look upon it like this. Correctly, that means analyzing this emptiness in the right way, and repeatedly doing it again and again. Like when we're doing our meditation, you might get that, at least you get a glimpse of that vacuity or some spaciousness. You give up, doesn't. You have to do it repeatedly to elongate, to get the deep realization of this. Correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. And in the 1 minute left before we break, I'll just introduce this next, which is called the fourfold profundity. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. You know what it is, Jeff? Form is empty. Sometimes some of the sutras say form is emptiness. There's some subtle philosophical debate here. Form is empty. Emptiness is form. Lisa, continue. Oh no, I thought you were mouthing. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is not other than emptiness. It's four things. Form is empty. It's the first of the five aggregates. Emptiness is form. Form is not other than emptiness. Emptiness is also not other than form. So we'll talk about that after our break. Try to a mini dedication of merit. I think that this morning I've created some virtuous karma. May this karma become the solely ripen in my spiritual evolution up to and including enlightenment for the welfare of all sentient beings. May it not ripen in any, gross way, just worldly pleasure that's experienced once and brings no benefit, maybe becoming a cause of my attachment and so forth. Whatever way it ripens, which will be pleasurable, may it only become the cause of my continued spiritual evolution up to and including enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. Okay, thank you very much. And buon appetito.